Time now for the Daily Answer, sponsored by Salem Surround on The Answer Now TV.
Don Lemon arrested. Did you see the letter from the attorney? While covering the Grammys. Oh, no, not while covering the Grammys. What is that supposed to be, like added gravitas? Anyway, yeah, Don Lemon, that was the big news heading into the weekend. That broke during the show on Friday that Don Lemon has been arrested. So here to discuss it, among many other things, because I know he follows this closely, and it's actually a very serious subject. I mean, while I'm having a little fun with it, the reason he was arrested is a deadly serious subject. And in fact, I would say, I told some friends over the weekend, I believe that the raid on Mar-a-Lago, it's like that. Like it's that big a deal. Like it's a nation-defining moment that if we tolerate that in a church service or we tolerate a president's home being raided, I think you've lost the country. I don't know if Senator Eric Schmidt agrees with me or not from the great state of Missouri, but joins us this morning. And Senator, I appreciate your time. I hope I don't sound too heavy-handed about that, but that's the way I feel. Good morning.
Good morning. Yeah, no, I think what we've seen in Minnesota with the radical anarchist so-called protesters is pretty dramatic. I think that this is part of a well-funded network to get people out to sow chaos. And it's really making a situation very dangerous. Of course, we've had the tragic deaths. But the politician, I think the most dangerous part of all of it is just the language that the governor and the mayor are using. You know, comparing law enforcement to the Gestapo and a secret police force, a Nazi occupation, being invaded. I mean, this is crazy. And it's fueling this rage that exists that is so ill-placed. I think that if you were paying attention, maybe you thought this started last weekend or a month ago, or even a year ago. It didn't. It started in January of 2021 when Joe Biden opened up our border and 15 million people came here illegally. And unprecedented, nothing was done about it. Nothing was done about it. And we would say, hey, we don't need new laws. We need a new president. Well, we have a new president who's enforcing the laws that have been passed by Republicans and Democrats alike, our immigration laws, and the left is losing their minds. And it's not about ICE or Trump or DHS. It's really about open borders. They really believe that we're citizens of the world and everybody can come here and they don't have to leave. That's what they really believe. And so when you distill it all, Chris, that's what this comes down to, why this moment in time is very important. Because in my view, you're either on the side of the rule of law or chaos. And so you got to pick a team here.
And isn't it all kind of part and parcel? I'm going to mishmash a lot of different stories into one because I think it's all the same theme. Whether it's what we're looking into in Fulton County with ballots, or whether it's the border, whether it's your Scam Act, which I want to talk about. That's the name of the Stop Citizenship Abuse and Misrepresentation. Whether it's the SAVE Act that's on deck, whether it's the fraud that we've uncovered in the largely Somali community in Minnesota. It's all part of the fraud, the scam. Taking advantage of the American taxpayer and the legal American citizen and voter, isn't it? It's all of that. It's just a network of fraud and conspiracy.
Yes. And to your point, the American taxpayers have been the ones who've been abused. And by an elite on the Democrat side that views them as bitter clingers and the deplorables and trash, as Joe Biden called them. They sort of look down on middle America and are perfectly willing to displace them from their jobs, perfectly willing to make them pay more in rent because illegal immigrants have flooded their community, perfectly willing to tolerate the fraud because these people vote for them, perfectly willing to bring in people who are committing acts of violence. I mean, you have to remember, tens of thousands of murderers were let in. Hundreds of thousands of other kinds of criminals were let in. And they don't seem to care about it because it pads their numbers at the polls. But you're right. This is about a much larger issue about whether or not a country can decide whether or not to enforce its laws or not. Or are you going to yield to a mob that doesn't like the election results? Because President Trump was pretty clear about what he ran on. I mean, the one thing, if you were to ask a voter in November of 2024, what is President Trump's basic platform? The economy, inflation in the economy, and illegal immigration. So it wasn't a side issue. It was front and center. And people said, you know what? We don't like what we saw over 4 years. And President Trump came in to fix it, and they don't like that. And that's why you're seeing these tantrums on the streets now.
That's why, and I must say, and I warned about it last week, and I can't assign it to any one person, but I think corporately, even some traditional conservative outlets, I won't name names, but I'll just say it's big business, the business of illegal immigration. And I think it would be disingenuous to say there's not an element of the Chamber of Commerce class that doesn't like it too. Have you sensed that?
Yeah, and I would say also the people that I grew up around in Missouri, in a working class neighborhood, they got hit with this double whammy, which was the globalists wanted their jobs shipped overseas for cheaper labor. And then as my friends and neighbors were looking for new jobs, those wages were undercut by illegal immigration. So, right, again, who's left holding the bag? The working class American. And people are tired of that. And that's what people really misread. It's what they don't really understand about this movement. What is this America First movement all about? That's a big part of it, because they've been sold out. They've been sold out to the highest bidder. The industries that built this great country were sold off for parts. We can't build enough stuff right now. Now, President Trump's doing a hell of a job of reindustrializing $19 trillion worth of investment in this country in advanced manufacturing, especially in the auto business. Well, that's all good stuff, but it's going to take a while to rebuild all that, because it was decimated and people's lives were left in the wake. And, instead of the factories, you had fentanyl, flooding into those communities. So there's a lot of work to do.
Eric Schmidt is with us, Senator of Missouri, and the two different acts that I really want to highlight, one that you're working closely on, I know you're working on both of them, the Stop Citizenship Abuse and Misrepresentation Act, as well as the SAVE Act. So there's the Scam Act and the SAVE Act, not entirely related, but sort of adjacent. Can you talk about them both and where you think they stand?
Yeah, the SAVE Act, it's pretty simple. You have to verify citizenship to vote. Here's the thing. You don't have to be a citizen to get a driver's license. And if you have a driver's license, you can vote, typically. And we ought to have a process to say, no, you actually have to be an American citizen to vote in our election. So it's pretty simple. The Democrats oppose it, shockingly. The Scam
and Senator Thune said, if I could interrupt, Senator Thune said he is putting ID requirement in this thing, and it is going to come to a vote. Are you confident it will? And what's the status if so?
I am confident we'll have a vote on it. Where and when, I don't know. Hopefully relatively soon. But I imagine that's coming to a head in the upcoming weeks to have a vote on that. And but again, this is part of the central doctrine. Illegal immigration is effectively the left's religion at this point. And so I can't imagine they'll support it. We'll see. But we should have a vote on that. The Scam Act is really in response to, I think, a lot of the fraud that we've seen, billions of dollars in these Somali strongholds. I think it's the tip of the iceberg across the country, with all those COVID dollars going out even last minute before Biden left office when COVID wasn't a thing. The fraud is just immense. And so we ought to do something about it. One is there ought to be prosecutions. Two, we ought to have greater controls on the front end to receive the money. You ought to verify that you're actually a business and people, you're serving people. We don't do that a lot of times in the blue states, and we need reforms on that front. And then what the Scam Act is to say, if you've committed that kind of fraud, or if you've committed a violent felony, or if you've joined, a member of a cartel, you can be denaturalized as a citizen in a 10-year look back. So you don't get to come here anymore, become a citizen, and then rip everybody off without any repercussions. If you do it, we're going to denaturalize you and we're going to send you back home. I think that's a very important deterrent. It would show we're very serious about what we've seen in Minnesota.
Before I let you run, the events of Fulton County last week, the raid on that, the ballots there where they store those ballots, do you have any insight into that, or what you think that might be about, or what the FBI is looking at there, or what they could find?
Well, obviously it was in sort of the epicenter of the 2020 election, so we'll see. We'll see where it all goes. But I think, my own personal view is that the American people deserve answers on a lot of questions that were presented that were never resolved because Joe Biden was in office. And we saw the systematic weaponization of government against anybody who dare raise those questions. If you were a lawyer in one of the election disputes, they tried to ruin your life. And by the way, litigation after elections is kind of normal, but they wanted to silence everybody. And then they ramped up their censorship machine, which I talk about in my book, The Last Line of Defense, right? They ramped that up to a level where any kind of dissent on COVID, on the election, on masks, on the vaccine, whatever, you were shut down. They wanted to ruin your life. And I do think there still needs to be a reckoning there.
Yeah, and they did ruin many lives, which is why I come right back to, not that it's about retribution, but
accountability.
Forgive me if I'm forgive me if I'm not shedding a tear for Don Lemon's arrest on Friday.
Yeah, look, the press asks me this all the time, Chris, what do you think about Trump going after his enemies? It's ridiculous. The premise is wrong. What we're doing is we're saying that the people who actually weaponized government against its citizens, they ought to be held accountable. That's a very different thing than what the left did in their 4 years. So I think in order to heal here, there has to be some prosecutions.
Amen. Senator Eric Schmidt, it is always a pleasure to catch up with you, my friend. I appreciate your time today, and I do hope you'll pick up his brand new latest book, The Last Line of Defense, How to Beat the Left in Court, which he's done. And thanks for your time this morning to kick off the new week.
All right, brother. Take care.
For full shows, live and on demand, it's Salem News Channel. Stay informed anytime, anywhere with the Salem News Channel and 9:30 a.m. TheAnswer.com. This has been The Daily Answer, sponsored by Salem Surround on The Answer Now TV.